Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. Let's take a look at a video.
Dan, my name is Josh Klein. I'm a professor of history at Southern Utah University. First of all, I'm a big fan of what you're doing, trying to make biblical scholarship accessible to outsiders like myself.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate the kind words very much. And what can I do for you?
When I am reading Bible in, say, church or with friends and family, so in informal settings, I don't have like a little button next to passages that will pop up a video from Dan McClellan to tell me, this is likely a later edition, like the woman caught in adultery story, or hey, this is a passage that the historical Jesus probably actually did say, like the 12 disciples ruling over the thrones of Israel passage versus passages, where Jesus is less likely to have claimed these things, like Bart Ehrman talks about the divinity claims of Jesus in the Gospel of John. In short, is there some kind of source that can accompany me on a verse by verse basis reading of the Bible to provide insights like that? And I suspect the answer is probably no. So help.
Hey, thank you for a great question, Josh. You're right that there's no single resource, digital or in print, that can do all of these things. There are a few different types of approaches you're talking about here. There are text critical approaches, there are source critical approaches, there are historical critical approaches, and there's no one resource that consolidates all of those different approaches on a verse by verse basis. But we can bring together a variety of different resources to try to answer those questions with differing degrees of granularity. So, for instance, if you got a good study Bible, like the New Oxford Annotated Study Bible or the SBL Study Bible, that's going to provide really helpful introductions at the beginning of books that will talk about authorship and date and setting and genre and all that kind of stuff to give you like a 30,000 foot view at what's going on. And then we'll have some explanatory notes, and when there are major linguistic or text critical or other issues that come up, they will usually note them in the text, but you're not going to be able to find a lot of information for every single verse. So to get more granular, particularly for text critical questions, I would recommend something like Bruce Metzger's book, A Textual Commentary on the Greek New Testament, which goes through and talks about all the verses that have major text critical issues going on with them, discusses what manuscripts witness to the text that we think was likely original, what manuscripts witness to secondary text that might be preserved in like the King James Version or something like that. And so, where there are text critical issues, that will be very granular and will go verse by verse through those text critical issues. Now, probably the most comprehensive type of resource that you want if you're talking about a specific book and you want to go verse by verse is going to be a good critical commentary. And the four commentaries that I generally recommend are first, and my favorite, the Hermeneia commentary series, then the Anchor Yale Bible Commentary Series, then the Old Testament Library and New Testament Library Commentary Series, and then the International Critical Commentary Series. I think those four do a really good job, but in terms of granularity, I would say the Hermeneia one is the most robust, the most comprehensive. And I'll give you an example. This is Paul Holloway's 2017 Philippians volume that is part of the Hermeneia Commentary Series. And so if we just look at the Christ hymn in Philippians 2, this is the first page. On the left, in the bold text, you have Holloway's translation of verses 5 through 11. So, not a large chunk of text. And then on the right, you have some textual commentary that's going to talk about variant readings that might be found in other manuscripts. And there's not a lot of variation in this passage, so that textual commentary is not going to be incredibly long. But you could look in Metzger's textual commentary on the Greek New Testament if you wanted more information on this kind of stuff. But then we scroll down and we get to analysis, which is going to give a broad overview of these verses, verses 5 through 11 in chapter 2 of Philippians. And then we're going to go verse by verse through commentary. So here you see the little square in the upper left followed by 5. So we're talking about just verse 5. And immediately we've got a little excursus on the genre of the Christ hymn in Philippians 2. And that goes on to the next page. Then we get a little overview of verses 6 through 8. And then we're going to go through verse by verse, starting with 6. And that's going to go for a couple of pages. And then we get to verses 7 and 8. and that's going to go until we get to another excursus, metamorphosis in Greco-Roman and Jewish myth. That excursus is going to go on for a little bit, and then we're picking back up with verses 7 and 8. We got another excursus, Paul's theology of the cross, and then we get verses 9 through 11, a little overview, and then we're going to look at verse 9 in more detail. And then we're going to get to ultimately verses 10 and 11. And you see the footnotes also go into a little more explanatory detail, but mostly are providing references if you want more detail on what the discussion is saying. And then we get the end of that section, and then begins the next section, which is chapter 2, verses 12 through 16. So for the most granularity, I would recommend something like a volume from Hermeneus' commentary series. If you want to look at text critical things, I would say look at Metzger's volume. That's going to be the most detail you're going to find. If you want a broader view of entire books and things like that, I would say the introductions that you'll find in a good critical study Bible, I think will get you most of the way there. But in terms of consolidating that all into one, we don't have a resource quite like that yet, but that would definitely be something helpful to have. And I am looking at ways to kind of facilitate that kind of access to information on a verse by verse basis. But that would be a very long-term project. So that's something that would be, decade or more down the road. That's not something that's going to be available anytime soon. I hope that is helpful, and let me know if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns. And the fit for this video is still Superman.